The world is ruled by a wide variety of leaders. There are those leaders who rule intending to improve their countries, and there are those who have a singular agenda in mind, to live off of their country's wealth. However, this man is quite different. The story of Evo Morales' life might just confuse you, and in this video we'll be looking at the confusing life of the one-time president of Bolivia. Evo Morales didn't just start out as the president of Bolivia. His origin goes back a couple of years to October 26th of 1959, when a boy was born to an Aymara family in a small rural village of Isalawi in Orinoco district, part of western Bolivia's Oruro department. He was one of 7 children born to their father, Dionisio Morales Choque, and his wife, Maria Aima Mamani. However, only he and 2 of his siblings, Esther and Hugo, survived past childhood. They weren't rich, and Evo already lost his mother, who nearly died from a postpartum hemorrhage following his birth. His family members were farmers, so he learned and he helped them to plant and harvest crops and guard their llamas and sheep from an early age, all while amusing himself with his homemade soccer ball. His education wasn't as stable or even remotely lucrative as one would have liked, as he briefly attended Orinoco's preparatory school as a toddler and began schooling at a single-room primary school in Isalawi at 5. When he turned 6, he spent 6 months in northern Argentina with his father and his sister. While his father harvested sugarcane, Evo sold ice cream and briefly attended a Spanish language school. Evo was a really big soccer fan and organized a community soccer team at age 13 with himself as the captain. Within 2 years, he had become the training coach for the entire region and gained early experience in leadership as a result. Evo had a thing for not finishing any other level of education apart from his primary education. He attended the Agrarian Humanistic Technical Institute of Orinoco, but he didn't complete his final year. His parents later sent him to study for a degree in Oruro, and while he wasn't academically sound, he finished all of his courses and exams by 1977. However, at the end of his tertiary education, he failed to collect his degree certificate. Throughout his school days, he earned money on the side as a day laborer, a brickmaker, a baker, and a trumpeter for the Royal Imperial Band, which allowed him to travel across Bolivia. After his tertiary education, Evo served his mandatory military service in the Bolivian Army from 1977 to 1978. Those 2 years were among the country's most politically unstable periods, as they had 5 presidents and 2 military coups led by General Juan Pereda and General David Padilla, respectively. After his military service, Evo returned to his family, who had survived the agricultural desolation of the 1980s El Niño storm cycle by moving to the tropics of Cochabamba in the eastern lowlands. In El Chapare, Evo joined a trade union of coca growers called Cocaleros and was appointed as the local secretary of sports. After joining the union, he earned the nickname the Young Ball Player due to his tendency to set up matches during meeting recesses. A foundational event in Evo's relationship with politics took place in 1981 when a coca grower was accused of trafficking cocaine, physically assaulted, and burned to death by soldiers. This is because coca is a traditional medicine and a ritual substance from the Andean culture, which can also be sold abroad as a major ingredient in cocaine. In light of the war on drugs, the American government tried to end the cocaine trade by thwarting coca production. As a result, they pressured the Bolivian government to get rid of it and sent troops to Bolivia to assist with the operation. Bolivian troops burnt coca crops and, in several cases, physically assaulted coca growers who challenged them. Evo didn't like this at all and returned to Cocalado campaigning. Just like several of his comrades, he rejected the $2,500 compensation provided by the Bolivian government for each acre of coca that he had destroyed. Deeply rooted in Bolivian culture, the coca growers had a long-lived relationship with cocoa, and they didn't want to lose their most lucrative means of sustenance. To these people, it was a matter of national sovereignty, as they viewed the United States as imperialist. From 1984 to 1991, the group began several protests against coca's forced extermination by setting up roadblocks, occupying local government offices, embarking on hunger strikes, and arranging mass marches and protests. Evo Morales was directly involved in this group activism, and in 1984 was present at the roadblock where 3 coca growers were killed. In 1988, he was then elected to the post of the Executive Secretary of the Federation of the Tropics. To fight against this violence, Evo decided that an armed Cocalado militia could start a guerrilla war against the government. However, he chose to pursue an electoral path. Evo was arrested and attacked by the government, as they tried to silence him multiple times, all to no avail. Members of the Sindicato Social movement initially suggested a move into the political arena in 1986. However, this led to internal conflict, as they feared politicians would join the movement for personal gain. Evo began to support the production of a political wing about 3 years later, but it wasn't until 1993 that a consensus in his favor emerged. However, that didn't go so well. The Bolivian gas conflict broke out in 2003, as activists, including coca growers, objected to the privatization of the country's natural gas supply and its sale to American companies below the market value. Activists blocked off the road into La Paz, which led to crashes with the police. There were 80 fatalities and 411 injured, including officers, activists, civilians, and children. Evo led the call for former President Sanchez de Lozada to step down due to this death toll, which gained widespread support from many activist groups and the middle classes. As pressure built up, President Sanchez resigned and fled to Miami, Florida. Carlos Mesa replaced him and tried to balance Cocalero and U.S. demands, but Evo didn't trust him. In March 2005, Carlos Mesa resigned and was replaced by Eduardo Rodriguez Veltze, who served as the president of a transitional government as they prepared Bolivia for a general election in December of 2005. This election was the one that brought Evo Morales into power in 2006. He spent 3 terms in the presidential position, lasting from 2006 to 2019. While in his 3rd term, he and his party, the Movement for Socialism, supported an effort to amend the country's constitution by national vote. This happened despite Evo's declaration in 2014 that he won't attempt to alter the constitution so he can have a 4th term. Even though he said he wouldn't attempt having a 4th term, MIS nominated Evo in December of 2016 as their candidate for the 2019 presidential election, claiming that they would seek other avenues to ensure the legality of his candidacy. The presidential election took place on October 20th of 2019, which was followed by mass street protests and counter-protests lasting until late November in response to the claims of electoral fraud. These claims were made following the suspension of the initial vote count, in which Evo Morales wasn't leading by a large enough margin of 10% to avoid a runoff, and the ensuing publication of the official count, in which he won by just over 10%. With all protests and issues following the election, Evo resigned as president on November 10th of 2019. He referred to his removal as forced and a coup, while saying he wanted to end the bloodshed from the election protests. He made the announcement from El Chapare, where he had sought refuge, while Mexico offered him political asylum immediately as his life and safety are at risk in Bolivia. Evo was also attacked by an armed intruder who broke into his home in Cochabamba, amongst many other attacks on him and his family and his supporters. In December, Evo left Mexico for Argentina, which also offered him political asylum. However, Bolivian prosecutors issued an arrest warrant for Evo later that month for alleged terrorism and sedition. The interim government claimed that Evo promoted violent incidents in the country before and after he left office. However, the arrest warrant was dismissed, and the charges were dropped when a court in La Paz found Evo's rights had been violated and judicial procedures breached. In February of 2020, Evo declared that he would run for a place in the Plurinational Legislative Assembly in the 2020 Bolivian general election. However, the National Electoral Tribunal ruled him out as ineligible to run for Senate. Apart from being a corrupt leader who was working towards staying in power for as long as he could while inciting violence and protests all over the country, Evo's had other run-ins with the law. This legal issue could have ruined a man's life and almost ruined Evo Morales' political career. On August 7th of 2020, a number of photographs of Evo with an alleged minor came to public notice and started circulating on social networks. Bolivian authorities and journalist Alejandro Entriambaseguas stated that Evo had been in a relationship with this minor since she was 14. Many news organizations related these accusations with some comments that he made twice about retiring with a quinceañera when he's no longer in the presidential post. The woman, later identified as 19-year-old Noemi Meneses, said that she's been in an intimate relationship with Evo since May of 2020. The police put her under house arrest, but she escaped and fled with her parents to Argentina. Evidence to support a long-term, intimate relationship between Evo and Noemi was gotten and released by Spanish and Bolivian press, including travel receipts of 3 trips by Noemi to Mexico and Argentina since Evo's exile, 90 photos of the pair in various locations, and extracts from 101 pages of text conversations and phone records between them. While this case of statutory rape remains an issue, another unrelated statutory rape case was filed against Evo Morales on August 21st of 2020. In this case, it stated that Evo had a child with a 15-year-old woman and that he is named on the birth certificate as the father. Evo claimed that this case was just part of a dirty war by the interim government against him. It's hard to believe that the man who started out as an activist trying to save his country from being controlled by imperialists finally got into power and became as bad as the people he fought against. Where have we heard that story before? That's besides the alleged cases of statutory rape that remain unsolved and the possibility of there being more women who can't come out due to fear. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you for watching The Playboy and the Corrupt Life of Evo Morales.